Welcome to the Resilient Performance Podcast. This is Keep It Real number 27. I don't even know how to preface this topic. We're going to take it in so many different directions probably, but Trevor, why don't you just take it and run?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we've kind of been seeing, as always, kind of like online in different educational places that are really working on qualities that are, I would almost consider more theoretical, that aren't really measurable. It's not just pure strength, it's not just pure range of motion, but it's more of these kind of like abstract qualities, like reducing certain asymmetries and things like that, things that we aren't really measuring. And there's definitely a time and a place for that. And I think those kind of lower level exercises that we give athletes or clients when they're coming in with some sort of issue, when they're being applied to a healthy population, especially to a younger population that really don't need them, that really need a lot more of just the foundational basic qualities of like strength, of being able to maintain tension in good positions, in good shapes. People then start, instead of just worried about like getting somebody stiff to be able to increase their elasticity or increase their strength or whatever kind of qualities that we've always kind of looked at the weight room for, we end up spending a lot more time working on these kind of like funky variations of a split squat or of a squat or of a hip hinge.
You kind of want to talk about then like giving people things that might be more like therapy like, when it might not be appropriate for them because they're either they're younger and like there's nothing objectively necessarily like quote unquote wrong with them, where there needs to be a fix or like an actual intervention. And it's just kind of like we're going to throw these kind of wacky movement variability-ish, therapy-ish type of drills at people just because.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Sort of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that movement variability is kind of a good kind of jumping off point, because it's like we all kind of understand the importance of movement variability, but when you have like a 10 or 12-year-old athlete who's can't do a good push-up, who can't do a good bodyweight squat, who can't hold the wall sit for 30 seconds, who can't hold the plank for 30 seconds, it's like those are the things that you should make sure they can do first before you're worried about like improving their movement variability for this kid that's loosey-goosey and has great mobility and great range of motion. It's like the qualities that we often chase to improve an athlete's movement variability, they have good range of motion, they have all that stuff, but they don't have the requisite stiffness or strength or force production capabilities or force absorption capabilities. So instead of working on those things that are much more important and a lot less sexy, we work on these different drills and funky variations like Greg's talking about to improve like variability and qualities that they really don't need or don't need to be prioritized at this point in their career.
And who knows how long something like that is even gonna, like, if it's useful in the moment, that's great, but it's not gonna they're not gonna adapt to it. They're not gonna become like a more quote unquote resilient, to use the resilient word. They're not gonna become a more resilient athlete because we did something like that. We need to stress them physically and give them things like power and capacity. Okay, yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. Doug, what do you got?
Yeah, and even to say like we're gonna give kids power and capacity, it's like just let them play and they're gonna be fine. I mean, if you look at like what Jeremy Frisch does, like you could say, okay, well, we want people to be able to get their arms over their head. Well, he has kids playing on the monkey bars, so they're gonna maintain that range of motion and they're gonna strengthen it by hanging, and it's dynamic. And also like the kids are trying to rip each other off the monkey bars, so he has them doing like crawl variations and throwing things. It's like, and I don't think in his mind he's like, I'm trying to develop, I don't want to speak for him, but he's not like, I'm trying to develop power. It's like they're doing stuff that's fun, that's going to build their athleticism. But I look at, but before a certain age, like there's no reason to be assessing people. There's no reason to be correcting people. There's no reason to make things too structured. And I think that the flip side of that is when we're assessing 13-year-olds and we're giving them corrective exercise and giving them things that like, even for adults are questionable. Like it's questionable that a healthy adult gets a lot of value out of walking sideways with a band around their ankles, but like to have a kid do that, I don't want to go as far as say that it's child abuse, but it's like, don't torture the poor kid. Like when it comes to kids, I'm like, just watch what Jeremy Frisch does and just copy it, because I look at that stuff and I'm like, wow, I wish more adults did that stuff. Like that's kind of how I want to train. It's fun. He's exposing them to every different kind of quality. And I'm sure he has like a structure and a thought process for what he's doing, but it's not so mechanical that it just takes the joy out of training. Like
And
there's a
it's
time and a place to be structured. Why waste that? You're going to get a unique benefit from it at a particular time. But especially with younger athletes, like they're so raw, just basically creating like a little bit more structured form of play is going to check all the boxes you want. And I think you can make a case that a lot of kids would be better off before a certain age without adults messing with like how they train. So if anything, a coach should be just a facilitator. It's like, we're going to create the right environment so that by playing with other kids, you're going to, you're training, but I'm going to stay out of your way as much as possible, because if you put kids in the right environment, they're going to like develop what they need to develop. But I think the more the coach tries to become like the centerpiece of athlete development by like doing assessments and making things as overly formal, then I think they're actually hindering the athletic development of the kid instead of helping it.
And then just, yeah, to go back real quick to the Jeremy Frisch stuff, if you watch like everything he posts, you then see like these same kids he has that are, out on the field with different obstacles that they're jumping over, doing, tumbling and all this stuff. Like that's all awesome and it's very age appropriate. And then you see he's got 17-year-olds that are Olympic lifting, before they're doing that sort of stuff. So it's still like mixed in, and they're still meeting the demands that they need to actually cause like a physiological stress at a certain age to become stronger, more powerful, where it's more thought out and like, structured. And then they're still doing things like jumping over obstacles and stuff like that. It's just like a different, that continuum. You're just constantly changing like where it is depending on the age and what's appropriate for that person.
I think too, there's such a difference between, because I think Jeremy Frisch is obviously the man, and I think he is one of the best social medias out there. I think he does such a great job of getting kids to like explore movement, not like worrying about like movement variability, so to speak, which again is like this abstract quality that you really can't measure movement variability. It's just this theoretical concept that we talk about, versus getting people to just move in a bunch of different ways and just do kid stuff to, like you said, to like all these different forms of locomotion that people just should be able to do, whether it's like hopping, different skipping variations, like karaoke, crawling, bear crawling, crab walking, monkey bars, all these different kind of locomotion things that athletes do in sports in 100 different possible ways, and making it fun and keeping it entertaining for them. And like that's the stuff that kids need. It's not these weird static holds in really specific positions trying to work on isolating this one muscle group. It's like, I'm sorry, like a 12-year-old probably doesn't need that. A 12-year-old just needs to be doing more and exploring how their body moves in space, and a lot more of those kind of coordination type exercises and body control exercises, rather than working on this one muscle that's going to kind of fix everything. Which even when we work with our adults, like we don't really do that stuff. I have tons of adults who come in with like a lumbopelvic issue, and we end up skipping and karaokeing and just working on just them controlling their body, and oftentimes they feel better when they just do things that humans should be able to do.
And yeah, if we have a kid, he's like 14 years old, and let's say he is missing something on like a table test that could be contributing to why he's even into CS to begin with. Like you could do a table exercise, or you could just have the kid running around doing different activities out on like the turf, or lifting some weights and doing different exercises that way. They could probably give you a similar benefit to your table test. It could change your table test just by doing things out that are more dynamic and where it's more relatable to why they're, because they want to be an athlete. They don't want to be on a table. So like there's definitely more than one way to make a change to a table test, if you even need to make a change to the table test. So that's sort of what we're getting at too, is like most of these kids don't have anything that they're really missing. They just need to play and be more, build some athleticism and coordination, and kind of just get tired and fatigued, and that'll kind of develop the qualities that they need.
Yeah, watching the stuff that Jeremy does forces me to kind of reevaluate even what I do with adults sometimes, because he creates these like obstacle courses, and you're watching, like the other day there was like this, probably couldn't have been more than like 7-year-old girl like doing like single leg hurdle hops, and somebody could watch that and be like, wow, that's like intensive plyometrics. Like how come she didn't do like 3 blocks of extensive jumps before she did that? But like, did it look perfect? No. Did it look dangerous? It did not look dangerous. So it's like these kids are doing this stuff, but then with an adult, we'd have them do like, a year of training before they did that exercise. So how much are we babying adults? I mean, I think that, kids and adults aren't the same. And if you've got like a detrained adult that's been in a sedentary job for 20 years, you're not going to have them do an obstacle course where they're jumping over like, 18-inch hurdles on one leg the first day. But the thing is, if kids aren't doing that in the gym, like they're gonna jump off a slide that's like 10 feet. I remember when I was a kid, like I jumped off things that, you know, I would like cringe if I thought about jumping off the mound. Like I was fine. So they have that window where their body is so receptive to exploring those things. And if we don't take advantage of that, then like we've squandered that window. And I think Jeremy does a great job of that, of letting people explore and, you know, doing things that are appropriate, but that are also like you look at them, and you're like, wow, like that's I would hesitate to have an adult do that, but the kids seem to be fine. And so it's like, but we should also reevaluate with an adult. Are we treating them as if they're too fragile as well? Because yeah, I mean, I don't know if everything has to have these very like neat progressions. And I think it gives us a peace of mind to say, well, like I've had somebody do X, Y, and Z, and now they're ready for the next thing. But are we creating too many steps en route to the things that are really important? Because we're, you know, everything has to have like a very like rigid progression. I think that, you know, we can have that debate about adults, but in kids, like it should be, the priority should be fun, getting them to explore, and then just setting the right constraints so that like just being around other kids socializes them and enhances their physical development without a ton of coaching. There's a time and a place to coach, but I think it's much easier to coach when young athletes have learned to explore and developed a movement base. Then you've got like a foundation from which to coach. But if you just start being overly technical too early on, then you've limited their creativity and their development, and now they're probably going to be kind of pigeonholed into a certain track, and you're limiting their potential versus having them start out with a wider base, and then when they're older, now you can try to focus on what's really important.
Yeah, I think, you know, what we're kind of talking about is like movement literacy, like making sure kids have movement literacy. I think part of it is, as kids only end up playing, like even if they're not specialized in one sport, they're still only playing sports multiple times throughout the year. Even they're playing 6 different sports, they're always in like this very structured setting where there's kind of there's a good or bad, there's a win or lose, and even in practice. So I think getting kids into environments where they can kind of like let go and have fun is really empowering for them. It can help them build confidence. So letting them just, you know, make mistakes and not having there be a punishment, like, you know, you're out or anything like that. I think all that stuff is really important for kids. And one of the things that I've been reading lately, and I think about that too, from even because I work with a lot of kids who will be, you know, 7, 8 years old. If they're playing a sport that they don't have the requisite skills for, that sport becomes very unfun for them. So it's like, if you have a kid who doesn't have the hand-eye coordination to be able to like hit a baseball, but you're making him play baseball, like he's going to hate baseball because he's going to strike out every time. He's just going to feel bad. It's like when you're doing different skills that aren't, again, that don't really have that win or lose aspect of it, and you're just working on building different movement skills and increasing their base of the pyramid, like you're talking about, Doug. It's like that's when kids start to enjoy movement, which ultimately that's what's going to help them have just more fun exercising and moving and just taking care of themselves like for their lifetime. So I think it's our job as coaches or therapists or however you look at that, just to make sure people like have some form of movement that they enjoy, that they have the skills to be able to do whatever kind of games they want to be able to do at some point in their life. Because there really are like just some really basic fundamental skills and qualities that everybody should have, and that's what's going to allow them to have fun doing whatever sport they end up choosing later on in their life.
I was going to kind of take this into a completely different direction, because you mentioned kind of like making adults, maybe we kind of baby adults, or we kind of make them seem more fragile than they actually are. And it just made me think about, very unrelated to what Trevor was just saying about children, just made me kind of think about in general, like how many times do we actually have like an ideal progression with our patients or our athletes and clients? Like it's usually not really ideal. Like if we had our ideal, like, all right, we have this progression and we lay it out and we have plenty of time, like that really only necessarily works like after a surgery. So there's so many times when we have people come in and they're like, all right, well, I need to kind of be ready to go for this athletic event, or, you know, this trip that I'm going on, like I need to be ready for that. And it's like, all right, well, like kind of back against the wall for us, the therapists, we don't have this like neat and like laid out time frame that we can kind of build you up for it. But like the people generally like kind of still do well. Like they're not going to just fall apart. And that's kind of just what I was just thinking about from what you said, Doug, about maybe making adults kind of seem fragile. where like, a kid didn't go through a progression necessarily, but he or she's still able to do some pretty wild things, jumping off the slides and things that you'd be kind of worried about doing yourself at this age. But yeah, I mean, it's not often that we have this neat progression to build people up. So it's kind of like, let's kind of do a bunch of different things that might make sense, and they're going to need to do it sooner or later anyway. So we better just kind of let them do it and explore it, and build upon that.
Yeah, whatever those things are. I mean, it's just like, does it look good? Does it pass the eye test? Does the person feel good doing it? And, does it increase or decrease their symptoms, whatever? So it's that subjective coaching eye, and then how do they feel doing it? And then if you have objective ways to measure movement, to calibrate your eye, then that's really all you can do. But yeah, I think we've got to go beyond clamshells and saying, I mean, like if you're working with someone that, like even a recreational athlete that goes skiing and plays tennis, and they're going to be like sprinting all weekend chasing after a ball, but the most aggressive thing we do with them in rehab is, a clamshell, like that's just leaving so much to chance. And I mean, what they're doing on that tennis court is just so much more stressful than anything that we're going to be able to probably simulate in a rehab environment. But we can do better than probably what we're doing.
Yeah.
And
Like that's the week one post-op exercise. Like that's not really appropriate for too many people.
right.
There's only so many times and places for that, one exercise in particular. So it's like, yeah, if they're going to go run around all weekend and play tennis and go skiing or whatever, like they're probably not really doing anything for themselves by doing, in this case, just that one exercise we're talking about. So it's just like, let's keep it real and find something that's kind of appropriate for them, meets the level of activity that they're able to do, and maybe push them a little bit.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's the standard of care in a lot of places. Like if you ask somebody, well, you had FAI, what did you do? I did clamshells. You had, anterior knee pain, what did you do? Clamshells. And shout out to a student we just had, Danny. He got us a sign for our clinic that says no clamshells allowed. So yeah, I mean, maybe there's a place for it sometimes, but they're overdone. And that's a hill I'm willing to die on.
There's plenty of things like that in especially like the rehab world. It's like, yeah, it should just be like something you're checking off the list. Like, okay, you can do it, great, move on to something else, something a little bit more challenging. I think we see the problem when adults are just spending forever just doing these kind of low level exercises that aren't really improving the qualities that they need. Like once you can do it, There's got to be something else that we can kind of move to that are going to activate the same muscles. If that's the reason that you're choosing a clamshell in the first place, like there's definitely harder exercises that we can choose that'll activate all the same muscles that your clamshell will, that'll probably prepare them a little bit more for the stress and the force that they're going to get back to when they ski or whatever activity that they want to get back to.
It's funny too, because it's funny how like echo chambers start, and physical therapy is an echo chamber, and we have our own echo chamber. Like we're doing an echo chamber right now. But
this is 100% an echo chamber.
Yeah, but I mean, like if you look at professions, oftentimes like speak their own language and they value certain things, and they do things more to impress their colleagues than to actually serve the end user. And clamshells are a great example, because like why are they so valued? It's like, well, somehow whatever it was, like 10-20 years ago, like glutes became important. And then once glutes became important, like no one ever questioned their sacred place on this mantle of muscles. So glutes are important. And then it's like, oh, well, we have an EMG machine. It can measure the muscle activity in various exercises. And then clamshells were found to have the most EMG activity of the glutes. So glutes are good. Clamshells have high glute EMG activity. Therefore, clamshells are good. Slightly faulty logic. But like if we went and we gave a presentation to like other physical therapists about that, we would be applauded. But then, when I ask patients, I'm like, well, what's the most aggressive thing you did at physical therapy prior to this? Like, well, like clamshells. But even they're like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, why is that all I did? So people who don't have doctorates in physical therapy, like to them, it doesn't pass the sniff test, but in the echo chamber, it's like, well, yeah, glutes, EMG, clamshells. So I think sometimes like, if we can step outside our field, or get people like just totally unrelated to physical therapy and be like, hey, can you audit what I'm doing? They would look at what we were doing as a field and be like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't care how much research you did. Like you made a bunch of assumptions, and then you just started asking the wrong questions, and you ended up here and you're like so far off the path. But that's kind of what happens. I mean, not just in physical therapy, but in a lot of places, because we just want to impress our colleagues, and you impress your colleagues by doing the thing that is already valued. You know, you're going to double down on what everyone else is already doing. You're not going to like do something new, because then they're going to be like, well, what are you doing? Like, you're saying that clamshells aren't good. Like, that's what everybody does. Like, you know, they're not going to welcome you to the lunch table if you do that.
It's like we need to be audited not by each other but by clients. Like there's a
Yeah.
reason clients are coming in, whatever they're coming in for. Oftentimes, like we all, you know, it's like in school you're kind of taught to like these are the things we want clients to be able to do. It's like that's fine, but ultimately the client is the one who's going to choose who will be able to truly determine whether or not they're better, whether or not their goals are met. So it's like if doing clamshells helps them get back to whatever they want to do, then great, they work. But I would bet that's probably not the case most of the time. So it's like
not the reason why they're
Yeah.
actually better.
right. So it's like we need to ask our clients to kind of audit us and ask like, did we truly help them? I think that's like kind of what this whole discussion is to a certain degree. It's like, are you getting out of this experience what you wanted in the first place? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Like we give clients an experience when they come in and see us for a service. We need to help them have the best experience that they can and meet them in the middle of what we think is best for them, but also giving them like what they want, and which is ultimately probably to a certain degree what they need as well.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's perpetuated this is you can't separate like the standard of care from the overall healthcare system. And, you know, I think part of what drives this is if physical therapy is free and, you know, you're paying 10 or 20 bucks for a copay, like, yeah, you're going to go in 3 days a week because you really have no skin in the game. But, you know, and I'm not talking about like someone has like a heart attack or has a rare genetic disease. Like obviously insurance should pay for that, and that somebody shouldn't be burdened for the rest of their life for a chronic medical condition. But I'm talking about like, yeah, if you have pain in the front of your knee, if there was more of a price for physical therapy, and would you pay out of pocket the full rate to do clamshells 3 days a week for 6 weeks with no progression? Most people probably would not. And that's why, like, you know, I know people listening, they're going to be like, well, like what he's saying isn't evidence-based, but it's like, it's not perfect, and markets aren't perfect, but the free market could solve a lot of these problems. I guarantee you the standard of care and anterior knee pain and hip pain would be different if at least the cost was more transparent and it wasn't hidden. Because even though it's free, like you're getting less money from your employer because your health insurance is paying for everything that you do, even if it's not a true medical emergency. People had more skin in the game and there was like more price transparency. We would like clamshells wouldn't be the thing that they are. And I'm pretty confident in saying that.
And I also talking about evidence, like I remember there being research that we went over in physical therapy school about like people, they compared going to physical therapy versus not going to physical therapy, and people had like similar outcomes. So it's like,
Or just doing like generic exercise or
it's
whatever.
like-
That's always a big one too.
you can't even compare therapist to therapist, and then you're comparing like no therapy to therapy. It's like nobody really can prove anything essentially.
Right. But that's the thing is like, that's
Fine.
why the least worst system is, you know, what do people want? Like, did they get what they want to out of the experience? And they're gonna choose with their feet and their wallet. So, and obviously there's certain medical conditions that aren't conducive to that model.
Right.
But, you know, if people had more skin in the game, it's not perfect, but I think it would reveal a lot more of like what we think is effective and what's not. Or at least people, you know, people can choose pay to spend their money, choose to spend their money however they want, but at least they're paying for what they want, not for some homogenized system that's dictated to them by like a health insurance company and this very like generic healthcare system.
And the people who wind up on our tables are kind of the people who have like tried you know an in-network model and been unhappy with it because they were like, why am I even here? I'm kind of just doing the same thing 3 days a week, and I could even do this on my own at home, but even still, like I'm not really feeling better. So yeah, I mean, I don't even know what we're going to title this talk. We went in so many different directions, but I think it's all good.
Yeah, and how do most clinics define success? Like in any other business, it's did the client get what they want for the least amount of investment of time and money? In our field, it's did you like retain them for every visit the insurance company authorized? Like that's a very unhealthy model. But that's like if there's certain clinics where, you know, if you discharge somebody before the authorized number of visits, like you would be punished at the end of the year. Like they'd say like, you did not meet our metrics. So that's like, it's a very toxic culture. I think it drives a lot of the treatment, frankly, which is why you can't separate, you know, medical care from the system in which it it's delivered, because the system is dictating a lot of times, at least in physical therapy, why it is the way that it is. But then if somebody tears their ACL, they get authorized 20 visits, which is not sufficient. So it's, yeah, there's going to have to be creative solutions, because whatever is being done now, it's just like, it's amazing that it works as well as it does. It's because people are so robust and resilient that it's not as catastrophic as it really is. Like, people succeed in spite of what we do a lot of times.
Nailed it. All right.
Take care of the kids. Have fun with the kids.
Have fun with the kids.
Have fun with the
Make
kids,
it
yeah.
enjoyable. Do
Stress-
stuff that's hard for them and that they enjoy.
Stress your adults. Do
Yeah.
some things with your kids. Yeah, that's perfect.
We
That's
love
enough.
the kids.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Resilient Performance Podcast. As a thank you for listening, please use promo code PODCAST for 10% off our professional development resources at resilientperformance.com. Also, make sure to sign up for our mailing list to receive exclusive content and promotions.